Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. My homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Homage to our teacher, Pinwat Lokuswami Mahansi. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya.
So today I will be doing the English Dhamma program. I selected for today a very nice sutta, very nice discourse of the Buddha found in the Majjhima Nikaya. Maybe you've heard of it, Dantabhūmisutta. It's Majjhima Nikaya 125. If you'd like, you can follow along with the discourse on the internet. So I think you'd be able to find, I'm following Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. I think you'd be able to find that on the internet, maybe on Sutta Central, if you wanted to follow along.
Sorry, Bhante, what's the number again, Bhante?
125?
Okay, yes.
Okay, so this discourse, the special thing about this discourse is that the Buddha here explains what's called in Pali Anupubbhasikha, which means the gradual training of a monk. So there are steps in monastic life, right? So gradually, so a monk first ordains, right? As a monk as the first step. And then gradually, he practices the Buddha's teachings bit by bit, step by step, to develop the mind, to develop the Noble Eightfold Path, right? It doesn't all happen at once. There are various steps. Just like in lay life, you can think about education or a career, for example. There are various steps. You can't go from first grade right to university, right? And you can't go from maybe a cashier to upper level management right away, right? Step by step, and takes time. Okay, so I see the link has been posted. Everyone can follow along with that. I'm using Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. So in this sutta, we can understand actually, because I'm the only one here who's living a monastic life. So for all of you, you can understand more deeply what a monk's life is like, what a monk actually does during the day, right? This is a very good discourse to understand that. So let's begin. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel's sanctuary. Now on that occasion, the novice Achiravata was living in a forest hut. Then Prince Jayasena, while wandering and walking for exercise, went to the novice Achiravata and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the novice Achiravata, Master Agivesana, so he's using the novice Achiravata's clan name, I have heard that a monk who abides here diligent, ardent, and resolute can achieve unification of mind. So two things I wanted to point out. So do you all know that in the Buddha's dispensation, for monks and nuns, there are two forms of ordination? Two forms of ordination. The first is the novice ordination, where a monk or a nun observes a selected number of precepts, not all of the precepts, and they train in that for some period until they're suitable for the higher ordination. So it's a stepwise process. Initially, this didn't exist in the Buddha's dispensation, but when the Buddha's son, the Venerable Rahula, was ordained, the Buddha instituted this procedure for ordaining novices. So novice monks observe 10 precepts. You probably know the 10 precepts, right? It's the 8 precepts with the extension of not accepting money. So then Prince Jayasena, what is he asking here? He's asking, or actually he's saying, I've heard that a monk who abides here diligent, ardent, and resolute can achieve unification of mind. So this essentially means that he can achieve samadhi, some concentrated state of mind. Now normally, the nature of the mind is that it doesn't stay in one place, right? So it's moving from object to object all the time. So it's the nature of the mind to grasp onto different objects that are experienced through the senses, right? So here, Prince Jayasena is saying that he has heard that a monk who is diligent, ardent, and resolute is making an effort to remove defilements from the mind, that he can attain a state of samadhi. So then the novice Achitavata replies, that is so, Prince, that is so. A monk who abides here diligent, ardent, and resolute can achieve unification of mind. So the novice Achitavata says that this is true, this can happen. It would be good if Master Agavesana would teach me the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. So now Prince Jayasena is asking for a Dhamma talk, right? He would like to learn further. I cannot teach you the Dhamma, Prince, as I have heard it and mastered it. For if I were to teach you the Dhamma as I have heard it and mastered it, you would not understand the meaning of my words, and that would be wearying and troublesome for me. So this is interesting, that right away, the monk Achitavata, he doesn't want to teach actually. So even though he's asked, he doesn't want to teach. What is the reason he gives? Is that Prince Jayasena wouldn't understand what he's saying actually. So we can think about, I think all of you are probably familiar with the life story of the Buddha. So after the Buddha was enlightened, he also had a similar thought, right? So he was enlightened, he's thinking this Dhamma that I realized was profound is very difficult to understand and see. If I teach this to people who are immersed in greed, hatred, and delusion, they won't understand the Dhamma. So that would just be troublesome for me. So the Buddha initially wasn't inclined to teach what he had realized. But then, as I remember, Brahma Sahampati invited the Buddha to teach out of compassion for the world, right? So even if a few people understand, then that's a huge benefit, right? So beings can escape from samsara. So then Prince Jayasena is asking again, he would really like to learn, let Master Agavesana teach me the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. Perhaps I can understand the meaning of his words. I shall teach you the Dhamma, Prince, as I have heard it and mastered it. If you can understand the meaning of my words, that will be good. But if you cannot understand the meaning, then leave it at that and do not question me about it further. Let Master Agivesana teach me the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. If I cannot understand the meaning of his words, if I can understand the meaning of his words, that will be good. If I cannot understand the meaning, then I will leave it at that and will not question him about it further. So then, the novice Achitavata teaches Prince Jayasena the Dhamma. So he teaches him the Dhamma as he has heard it and mastered it. After he had spoken, Prince Jayasena remarked, "It is impossible, Master Agivesana. It cannot happen that a monk who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute can achieve unification of mind." So first he heard that such a thing is possible, right? And then he comes and asks this monk Achitavata about it. Can a monk actually attain a state of samadhi? So then after the Venerable Achitavata explains the Dhamma to him, he doesn't believe it. He doesn't accept it. So we can think in the time of the Buddha, do you all know about Nigantanataputta, the historical founder of Jainism, the Indian religion Jainism? So he didn't believe that a state of concentration without thought and examination, vitakka vichara, he didn't believe that such a state existed. So in such a state, the minds, the thoughts of the mind, the verbalization in the mind stops. So Buddha called that noble silence. So Nigantanatha Buddha didn't believe that such a state existed. He used a simile to explain it, like trying to stop the water of the river Ganges with one's fist. So the speed of the mind, right, with thoughts arising and passing away, to stop such a thing, he didn't believe that it was possible. But in the Buddha's teaching, it's possible in the second jhana. So here Prince Jayasena doesn't believe what the novice Achitavata says. Then having declared to the novice Achitavata that this was impossible and could not happen, Prince Jayasena rose from his seat and departed. So he left. Soon after Prince Jayasena had left, the novice Achitavata went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to the Blessed One, he sat down at one side and reported to the Blessed One his entire conversation with Prince Jayasena. When he had finished, the Blessed One said to him, this is an interesting passage, Agivesana, how is it possible that Prince Jayasena, living in the midst of sensual pleasures, enjoying sensual pleasures, being devoured by thoughts of sensual pleasures, being consumed by the fever of sensual pleasures, bent on the search for sensual pleasures, could know, see, or realize that which must be known through renunciation, seen through renunciation, attained through renunciation, realized through renunciation. That is impossible. So here the Buddha is explaining, so the novice Achitavata, or just a monk in general, and Prince Jayasena, if we compare, they're leading two very different lives, right? So one is royalty. He's a prince. He may become the king of the country in the future. So he has sensual pleasures according to his royal status, according to his wealth, right? How do the leaders of the countries live today? Right? They live luxurious lives with the power and wealth that they have. So on one hand, we have such a lifestyle. Then the lifestyle of, say, the novice Achitavata here, He's living in a forest hut. So he doesn't accept money, he doesn't use wealth, he doesn't pursue sensual pleasures. He has given up sensual pleasures. So the two lifestyles are very different. And here the Buddha is explaining that that state, that unification of mind, is to be attained through renunciation. So by renouncing sensual pleasures. Maybe you probably read in the suttas the formula for the first jhana. Viviccheva kamehi, viviccha kusalehi dhammehi. So a monk is separated from sensual pleasures. Viviccheva kamehi, separated from unwholesome states. Viviccha kusalehi dhammehi. So to attain the first jhana, the first thing the Buddha mentions is that one needs to be separated from sensual pleasures. It can be, you could be separated bodily or mentally. But here you need both, really, because you probably have some experience with this when you've gone on a meditation retreat, maybe. So when you sit down to meditate, maybe you're in the meditation hall in Toronto. So there are no sensual pleasures there, but sensual desire can come to your mind, right? About sensual pleasures in the past or in the future, right? Your home, job, family, all these thoughts can come to the mind, even though those things don't exist in the environment. None of those things may be there in the meditation hall. So we can understand the nature of the mind here, right? So we can think of bodily seclusion, which is being alone, separated from sensual pleasures physically, and then mental seclusion, which is being withdrawn from sensual pleasures in mind and attaining a state of samadhi. So, do you all know the 5 hindrances to meditation? Yes? So the first one is kama chanda, sensual desire. So as long as that hindrance is there, that's an obstacle to attaining samadhi. It's an obstacle to attaining, here in the sutta it's explained, unification of mind, oneness of mind, where the mind is focused on one object continuously. So an obstacle to that is sensual pleasure. So we can understand for lay disciples living a lay life, associating with sensual pleasures, it is not easy to attain, for example, the first jhana. Why? Because the environment, a life associating with sensual pleasures, is not conducive to that. Because it fuels one of the hindrances, right? So that's why we have meditation retreats. That's why you can come to the monastery where the environment is different and you let go of that kind of lifestyle for a temporary period to practice meditation, right? To develop the mind. So it's important to understand this. Otherwise, we can try to practice meditation, but maybe we're doing it in the wrong way. So maybe we enjoy some television program or go out and enjoy ourselves somewhere, and then we come back home and try to sit alone and practice meditation, and it can be very difficult because what we have been doing for some period previously is associating with sensual pleasures. So in general, we can understand the pursuits of lay life and monastic life are different. So in lay life, as sensual pleasures increase, happiness increases, right? So that's why People make an effort to pursue wealth and acquire as much money as possible because through that they can have more sensual enjoyment and the happiness of lay life thereby increases, right? That is a happiness, that is true. But in the monastic life, it's different, right? When a monk's life becomes more and more simple, more and more contented, calm, distance from sensual pleasures, he can experience more and more happiness. So it's a different kind of happiness, very different. So now to continue with the sutta, suppose Aggivesana, here the Buddha is giving a nice simile to further explain this. Suppose Aggivesana, there were two tameable elephants, horses or oxen, that were well tamed and well disciplined, and two tameable elephants, horses or oxen, that were untamed and undisciplined. What do you think, Aggivesana? Would the two tameable elephants, horses or oxen, that were well tamed and well disciplined, being tamed, acquire the behavior of the tamed? Would they arrive at the grade of the tamed? Yes, Venerable Sir. So that's where the name of the sutta comes from, Dantabhūmi, grade of the tamed. It's like the level of a tamed animal. So they have a certain like level with respect to their behavior. You can measure the difference between a tamed horse, for example, and an untamed horse, a wild horse. But would the two tameable elephants, horses or oxen, that were untamed and undisciplined, being untamed, acquire the behavior of the tamed? Would they arrive at the grade of the tamed, like the two tameable elephants, horses, or oxen that were well tamed and well disciplined? No, Venerable Sir. So the behavior of the two animals is quite different. The wild horse, wild colt, and the well-tamed horse, thoroughbred horse, for example. So very different behavior we find in the two horses. They're different. So too, Aggivesana, it is impossible that Prince Jayasena, living in the midst of sensual pleasures, enjoying sensual pleasures, being devoured by thoughts of sensual pleasures, being consumed by the fever of sensual pleasures, bent on the search for sensual pleasures, could know, see, or realize that which must be known through renunciation, seen through renunciation, attained through renunciation, realized through renunciation. So again, the Buddha reiterates that the causes to attain that unification of mind, they're not found in Prince Jayasena because he's consumed by sensual desire. And it is not possible with such a state of mind to see or understand a state of samadhi that has to be realized through renunciation of sensual pleasures. Then the Buddha gives another simile. Suppose, Aggivesana, there were a high mountain not far from a village or town, and two friends would leave the village or town and approach the mountain hand in hand. Having reached it, one friend would remain below at the foot of the mountain, while the other would climb to the top. There's really a beautiful simile here. Then the friend who remained below at the foot of the mountain would say to the friend who stood on the top, "Well, friend, what do you see standing on top of the mountain?" And the other replied, "Standing on top of the mountain, friend, I see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely meadows, and lovely ponds." So he sees this beautiful scenery from the top of the mountain. Then the first friend, the one who's below, what does he say? "It is impossible, friend. It cannot happen that while standing on top of the mountain, you should see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely meadows, and lovely ponds. So he doesn't believe that it's possible. So what is the Buddha saying in this simile? So Prince Jayasena, the life he's living, he can't understand. He can't see a state of samadhi. But for the monk who is making an effort to develop wholesome states, who's living a different lifestyle, having renounced sensual pleasures, it is possible to realize such a state. But Prince Jayasena doesn't believe this because he's not in such a position to see that, like the friend who's below the top of the mountain. He can't see what's on top because he's below, right? But the other friend who's in a different position, he can see all the scenery. So here the Buddha is pointing out that Prince Jayasena's response is foolish because he's not in a correct position to understand what the novice Achitavata said. Then what happens? Then the other friend would come down to the foot of the mountain, take his friend by the arm, and make him climb to the top of the mountain. After giving him a few moments to catch his breath, he would ask, "Well, friend, standing on top of the mountain, what do you see?" And his friend would reply, "Standing on top of the mountain, friend, I see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely meadows, and lovely ponds." So when the second friend is actually brought to the same state, same position as the first friend, then he can see everything that's there. So before, he didn't believe it. He didn't believe that such a thing existed. But when his position changes, what happens? That he can see for himself. He doesn't even have to believe. It's his own experience, right? So that's what's so wonderful in the Dhamma. One of the qualities of the Dhamma, right? Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sandiptiko. It can be realized in this life. Akaliko is timeless. Ehipasiko, come and see. So a person can learn the Dhamma and practice accordingly, and they can see results for themselves. They don't need to just blindly believe in the Buddha, in what a monk says, in what the suttas say. They don't need to blindly believe. They can experience it for themselves when they practice the teachings. Opanaiko. So the teachings should be applied to oneself, to one's inner life. Pachatang veditabu vinyuhiti. They are to be realized, the Dhamma is to be realized, each according to his or her own wisdom. Then the first friend saying, "Friend, just a little earlier we heard you say, 'It is impossible, friend, it cannot happen that while standing on top of the mountain you should see lovely parks, lovely groves, lovely meadows, and lovely ponds.'" So that's what he first said. But just now we heard you say, so standing on top of the mountain, friend, I see lovely parks, and so on, lovely ponds. Then the other friend would reply, "Because I was obstructed by this high mountain, friend, I did not see what was there to be seen." So this is very important. It's showing the nature of the defilements of the mind. So the lovely parks, groves, meadows, and ponds, they were there. They exist. There are such things. But the one friend couldn't see them. Why? Because he was obstructed by the mountain. So the mountain was obscuring his field of vision. So in the same way, Buddha explains, so too Agavesana, Prince Jayasena is obstructed, hindered, blocked, and enveloped by a still greater mass than this, the mass of ignorance. avidya. Thus it is impossible that Prince Jayasena, living in the midst of sensual pleasures, and so on, being consumed by the fever of sensual pleasures, could know, see, or realize that which must be known through renunciation, seen through renunciation, attained through renunciation, realized through renunciation. Do you understand the similes?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, good. Aggivesana, if these two similes had occurred to you with reference to Prince Jayasena, he would have spontaneously acquired confidence in you, and being confident would have shown his confidence to you. So maybe if he was confident, he could have worshipped the Navasachitavata before he left. Or he might have wanted to offer something, like a robe, to the Navasachitavata. Venerable Sir, how could these two similes have occurred to me with reference to Prince Jayasena as they occur to the Blessed One, since they are spontaneous and never been heard before, and have never been heard before? So the Navasachitavata is humbled. How could I think about these similes like Buddha does? Suppose Agdivesana, a head-anointed noble king, addresses his elephant woodsman thus: Good elephant woodsman, mount the king's elephant, enter the elephant wood, and when you see a forest elephant, bind him by the neck to the king's elephant. Having replied, Yes, sire, the elephant woodsman mounts the king's elephant, binds him by the neck to the king's elephant, mounts the king's elephant, enters the elephant wood, and when he sees a forest elephant, binds him by the neck to the king's elephant. The king's elephant leads him out into the open. It is in this way that a forest elephant comes out into the open, for the forest elephant clings to the elephant wood. So this is how in India in those days they would um, capture elephants and tame them to use them in warfare or in the city for maybe some construction purposes or for vehicles. Also, the king would ride on an elephant, right? So then the elephant woodsman informs the head anointed noble king, Sire, the forest elephant has come out into the open. The king addresses his elephant tamer thus: Good elephant tamer, come, good elephant tamer, tame the forest elephant. Subdue his forest habits, subdue his forest memories and intentions, subdue his distress, fatigue, and fever over leaving the forest. Get him to take delight in the town, inculcate in him habits congenial to human beings. So what happens to the elephant as soon as he is taken out of the forest? He's very upset, right? So here's the Buddha saying he's distressed. He's remembering his life in the forest and his intentions of living in the forest. He has forest habits. So the elephant tamer's task is to get the elephant to be happy among human beings in a different environment. So the elephant tamer says, Yes, sire, and he plants a large post in the earth and binds the forest elephant to it by the neck in order to subdue his forest habits, and so on, and to inculcate in him habits congenial to human beings. Then the elephant tamer addresses the elephant with words that are gentle, pleasing to the ear, and lovable, as go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. This is a way we should try to speak, actually. These words are used in the suttas over and over again. We should try to speak pleasing words that are gentle and lovable to other people, courteous, things that people like to hear. When the forest elephant is addressed by such words, he listens, gives ear, and exerts his mind to understand. So rather than shouting at the elephant, if someone shouts at us, do we really feel like listening to that person? Or do we kind of like turn off, right? The shutdown. But if we speak gentle words to people, we're more likely to have them listen to us. The elephant tamer next rewards him with grass, fodder, and water. When the forest elephant accepts the grass, fodder, and water from him, the elephant tamer knows now the king's elephant will live. So he won't die by refusing food and water because of his desire for the forest. Then the elephant trainer tames him further. Take up, put down. When the king's elephant obeys his tamer's orders to take up and put down and carries out his instructions, the elephant tamer trains him further thus: go forward, go back. When the king's elephant obeys his tamer's orders to go forward and go back and carries out his instructions, the elephant tamer trains him further thus: get up, sit down. When the king's elephant obeys his tamer's orders to get up and sit down and carries out his instructions, the elephant tamer trains him further in the task called imperturbability. He ties a giant plank to his trunk. So if it's a giant plank that's maybe very heavy, he probably can't lift his trunk anymore. A man with a lance in his hand sits on his neck. Men with lances in their hands surround him on all sides, and the elephant tamer himself stands in front of him holding a long lance pole. So he's surrounded by weapons on all sides. There's also a man on top of the elephant, sitting on his neck with the lance. When the elephant is being trained in the task of imperturbability, that means like remaining motionless, unperturbed amidst this fearful situation. He does not move his forelegs or his hind legs. He does not move his forequarters or his hindquarters. He does not move his head, ears, tusks, tail, or trunk. The king's elephant is able to endure blows from spears, blows from swords, blows from arrows, blows from other beings, and the thundering sound of drums, kettle drums, trumpets, and tom-toms. So this elephant is prepared for warfare now. This elephant can be used in war and be able to endure all the dangers and the fear that comes at the battlefield. Being rid of all faults and defects, purged of flaws, he is worthy of the king, in the king's service, considered one of the factors of a king. So this is the simile that the Buddha sets up. And now the Buddha is going to apply this simile to the monk. So the monk is like initially, he's like the elephant in the forest. So here we'll see how the Buddha applies this beautiful simile. Okay. So too, Agivesana, a Tathagata appears in the world, an Arahant, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, well gone, knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of devas and humans, enlightened, blessed. He declares this world with its devas, its maras, and its brahmas, this population with its recluses and brahmins, its princes and its people, which he has himself realized by direct knowledge. So the Buddha declares all of this through direct knowledge. not as a philosopher, like some people might believe the Buddha sat down at the foot of the Bodhi tree and just came up with a philosophy that he then taught. The Buddha realized all of this through his direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, and he reveals a holy life, a spiritual life, that is utterly perfect and pure. So the beginning of the Dhamma is sila, virtue. The middle is samadhi, concentration. And the end is panna, wisdom. A householder or householder's son, or one born in some other clan, hears that Dhamma. So in India in those days, the Buddha and the monks would wander from place to place teaching the Dhamma. So people would gather. In India, people had a really amazing desire to realize the truth of life, to gain a deeper understanding, realization of this life and its meaning. So people would go and listen to religious discourses. So someone hears the Dhamma from the Buddha or one of the Buddha's disciples. On hearing the Dhamma, he acquires faith in the Tathagata. Now, can I ask you, what does faith in the Tathagata mean? Maybe you can type an answer in the chat box. What does it mean to have faith in the Buddha? So this is the first step that the Buddha is showing. So there's a Tathagata in the world. He has gained enlightenment, and he teaches the Dhamma. And then someone hears that Dhamma, and he gains faith. So we need to gain faith in the Buddha as a first step. What does that mean, actually? Okay, so Harry says no doubt. Linda says faith in the Buddha's enlightenment. Saint says to believe in the Buddha. Delum says Shraddha. Yes, Saddha. Okay, Saddha is the word, but what is the meaning of that? So there's a meaning inside that word. So the Buddha explains in Pali, Saddhati Tathagatasa Bodhim. It means to place faith in the Buddha's enlightenment according to his 9 qualities. Buddha Guna, the Buddha's 9 qualities that he himself explains. Right? It's interesting if you actually think about it. The qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, who taught those? The Buddha taught all those qualities. We didn't come up with the qualities of the Buddha that we then taught to people. The Buddha taught them in the suttas, actually. So we have another answer, committed to the Buddha's teaching. So the answer the Buddha gives in the suttas is that we should have faith, place faith in the Buddha's enlightenment. So we should believe that the Buddha is enlightened. He is fully enlightened, perfectly enlightened in the world. He has the 9 extraordinary qualities. Itipiso Bhagava Arahang, Buddha is an Arahant. Samma Sambuddho, he's enlightened without a teacher. He's attained supreme enlightenment without a teacher. Vidya Charana Sampanno, so he is endowed with knowledge and conduct according to his realization and his knowledge. He lives his life. Sugato, the Buddha has gone to the supreme bliss of Nibbana. He has traveled the Noble Eightfold Path that he realized himself, and so on. We have to believe in all of these qualities. So it's not just a matter of reciting them in Pali or English or Sinhala. We actually need to believe, have confidence that the Buddha was such a person. He had such qualities, actually. So that is faith, actually. So with that faith, possessing that faith, he considers thus, this is someone who's embarking on the path to monastic life, household life is crowded and dusty. Crowded in the sense of, so there are a lot of people, so living among children, for example, if you're trying to listen to this Dhamma discourse and little kids are next to you pulling on your leg or pulling on your hair, speaking in your ear, it's not easy to focus on the talk. Crowded and dusty. So here, dust essentially means it's conducive to defilements. Life gone forth is wide open. It's like the open sky. It is not easy while living in a home to lead the spiritual life utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. On a later occasion, abandoning a small or large fortune, abandoning a small or a large circle of relatives, he shaves off his hair and beard, puts on the yellow robe, and goes forth from the home life into homelessness. Okay, so with the application of the simile of the forest elephant, right? It is in this way that a noble disciple comes out into the open. For devas and humans cling to the 5 objects of sensual pleasure. So the Buddha is explaining here, lay life is like the forest. And when a monk ordains, he's coming out of the forest of sensual pleasures, which devas and humans are attached to. So here it's explaining the benefits of monastic life and the drawbacks of lay life. So without thinking in that way, a person's not going to ordain, right? If they're only thinking about the benefits of household life. So in monastic life, there's a very different sense of freedom compared to lay life. Of course, in lay life, you have the freedom to eat whenever you want, eat whatever you want, go here and there as you wish, enjoy your wealth as you wish. There is that kind of freedom. In monastic life, there's a different sense of freedom where you're not impeded by various engagements or unnecessary attachments, work, tasks. So it's a very different sense of freedom there. Both lives have the kind of freedom particular to their lifestyle. So in this way, the monk comes out into the open. Then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, monk, be virtuous. Restrain with the restraint of the Patimokkha. Patimokkha sangvara sangvuto viharati. Be perfect in conduct and resort. So a monk should have a respectful character, a respectful kind of conduct and demeanor that is, how to say, conveys some sense of some sense of respect in his character. You're a respectable kind of person. And seeing fear in the slightest fault, trained by undertaking the training precepts. So even the smallest fault in his conduct, he should see that as fearful, so that he can remove that. In this way, the monk trains in virtue. Sila. Now this is interesting. After the Buddha explains one step, then he says, when Agivesana, the noble disciple, is virtuous, and so on, is repeated as in the previous paragraph, and seeing fear in the slightest fault, trains by undertaking the training precepts, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Then the Tathagata disciplines him further. So it's stepwise, this process of training. First step, of course, ordination for the training of a monk. Then the second step is to train in virtue. So without training in virtue, you can't go on to the next step. Then the Tathagata disciplines him further. So what's really interesting, in the time of the Buddha, there were no books, right? The Dhamma wasn't in books. So to learn the Dhamma, you had to learn directly from the Buddha or one of the Buddha's disciples. Now we can think about a monk, right? So a monk ordains and he has a teacher in monastic life. So all of the monks in Mahamevna, their teacher is Lokaswami Nansi. So we can think in those days, in the time of the Buddha, if you wanted to learn something in the Dhamma, you would have to go to the teacher and ask, right? And the teacher would teach the Dhamma according to the level that the pupil is at. So if the teacher teaches a certain thing to practice, say, and the pupil doesn't practice that, for example, then will the teacher go on to the next step? No, right? So he hasn't finished the first step yet. So in that way, it was a very different environment in the Buddha's time. Now, we can read the discourses as much as we wish, and we can see like advanced steps in the practice farther down the road, and we can want to go to them. But without having established the initial steps, without having practiced those, it's not possible to go to the later steps. Unfortunately, what happens to a lot of Westerners when they come to the Buddha's teachings or learn the Buddha's teachings, initially they come to them through meditation, right? And maybe they have little or no knowledge of virtue or experience with precepts. So they can't really benefit from the meditation because they haven't completed the initial steps. So here, the first step isn't to go to a secluded cave and attain samadhi, right? The first step is virtue. So it's very important to understand this gradual training. So it's a different lifestyle for the laity, but for all of you also there's a gradual progress in the path. You can't go to advanced steps without being established in the initial ones first. So after establishing himself in virtue, then the Buddha disciplines the monk further. Come, monk, guard the doors of your sense faculties. On seeing a form with the eye, do not grasp at its signs and features. Since if you were to leave the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade you. Practice the way of its restraint, guard the eye faculty, undertake the restraint of the eye faculty. And in this way, all six senses are explained. So our six senses are eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And through these six internal senses, we experience the external world, right? When the internal world of the senses meets the external world of forms, visible forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tangible objects, and mental phenomena, this is our experience of life. This is our experience of the world. Now, when this happens, though, when we, for example, see a visible form with the eye, if we don't have mindfulness, if we haven't guarded our senses, desire can arise, or ill will can arise, right? So in this way, we should understand that defilements arise through the senses. You can understand this very clearly, I think, in your own lives. So I think it's very apparent. So the Buddha said, for a man, he doesn't see any other form that so obsesses the mind as the form of a woman. The form of a woman obsesses the mind of a man. And the same for a woman. He doesn't see any other form, such as the form of a man, that so obsesses the mind of a woman. The form of a man obsesses the mind of a woman. And same for the other four objects of the senses: form, sound, so the voice of the opposite sex, form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So this is, according to the Buddha's words, these are the most obsessing objects that we can come in contact with, the five sensual pleasures. So in your own experience, you can think for yourself, maybe at work or when you're out and about doing errands at school. In one instant, you can see someone of the opposite sex and desire can arise. Very quickly, it can happen. You can see this in your own experience if you examine your mind. So, what desire is the cause of suffering in the Buddha's teachings? Craving is the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering. And if it's not desire, then hatred can arise towards something we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think about. So in this way, all the time, because of our senses, because of our experience with the senses, desire is arising, hatred is arising. So how to purify our mind from these? We have to practice sense restraint. So in this way, the Buddha explains it as not grasping the signs and features of objects. Now, practically to do this, the Buddha explains in other suttas, for example, the Chappanaka Sutta, that one should practice mindfulness of the body. So normally, this Indriya Samvara, restraint of the senses, is actually a fairly deep topic. Normally, the way we live, our attention is focused outward toward the visible forms we see, the sounds we hear, the smell, the odors we smell, the flavors we taste, the tangibles we touch, and the thoughts that we think about that come to mind. So instead of focusing our attention on all those objects, we should focus our attention on the body. We should practice Kayagata Sati, the first foundation, first establishment of mindfulness. So in that way, the mind doesn't get scattered outward because it's focused on the body. It has a different object. So in that way, when one experiences forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, thoughts, one doesn't focus one's attention on those outward. One has one's mindfulness focused on the body instead. Either practicing mindfulness of postures, sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, wisdom in all of our daily actions to prevent defilements from arising. So in this way, we can guard the doors of the senses at the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And thereby we can prevent unarisen, unwholesome states from arising. That's the first factor of right effort. Samma vayama in the Noble Eightfold Path. Anupannanang akusalanang dhammanang anupadaya. So to prevent the arising, well, let's say for the non-arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. So you chandanjaneti vayamati, so you arouse desire, make an effort, and so on. We can do this through Indriya Samvara, restraint of the senses, by practicing mindfulness of the body. Then, after practicing restraint of the senses, then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, monk, be moderate in eating. Reflecting wisely, you should take food neither for amusement, nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the endurance and continuance of this body, for ending discomfort, and for assisting the spiritual life, considering, thus I shall terminate old feelings of hunger without arousing new feelings of hunger, and I shall be healthy and blameless, and shall live in comfort. So we eat to continue living, or actually I should say, so here in the monk's practice, a monk eats to continue living, to support the body, because this body subsists on food. And he needs to eat the correct amount. If he eats too little, then the body is not properly nourished. You can remember the Bodhisattva when he was practicing self-mortification and eating, for example, 1 grain of rice a day. It wasn't enough food for the body to have strength. So he was very weak those days. So without eating enough food, it's not possible to develop the path. And eating too much food is also a hindrance because that's conducive to drowsiness. So he should eat to eliminate the pains of hunger, and he should eat enough so that new pains of hunger don't arise. So you can, in your experience, if you're hungry, you can eat a very small amount of food and maybe the pains of hunger will go away, but quickly again you're hungry. So that's not enough for a monk. So this is the next step. Then, when the noble disciple is moderate in eating, notice the order here, how it's progressing virtue, then restraint of the sense faculties, moderation in eating. So there's you can think for yourselves why the Buddha taught this particular order. Then the Tathagata disciplines him further. Come, monk, be devoted to wakefulness. During the day, while walking back and forth and sitting, purify your mind of obstructive states. Purify your mind of the 5 hindrances: sensual desire, ill will, drowsiness and lethargy, restlessness and remorse, and doubt. So while walking back and forth and sitting, so he's doing walking meditation and sitting meditation, he's purifying his mind from these obstructive states. In the middle watch of the night, you should lie down on the right side in the lion's pose, with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and fully aware, after noting in your mind the time for rising. After rising in the last watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, purify your mind of obstructive states. So the monk is sleeping less now. So he's trying to stay awake and develop wholesome states and remove unwholesome states in mind while meditating, walking, and sitting. So, Indriya Samvara, restraint of the senses, is one of the initial trainings, right? Because without that, say, if you don't have restraint of the sense faculties regarding food, you can overeat. So then he doesn't have moderation in eating. So then he can't move forward to the next step. So if he has restraint of the sense faculties, then he can practice moderation in eating. If he doesn't have moderation in eating and eats too much, then drowsiness can be a difficult problem, right? So there's a very nice order that the Buddha explains here. Then after that, after he's devoted to wakefulness, the Buddha disciplines him further. Come, monk, be possessed of mindfulness and full awareness. So he's practicing Sati Sampajanya now in the Satipatthana, the establishments of mindfulness, specifically regarding the body. Act in full awareness when going forward and returning, when looking ahead and looking away, when flexing and extending your limbs, when wearing your robes and carrying your outer robe and bowl, when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, when defecating and urinating, when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. So in all of his actions during the day, the monk is trying to establish mindfulness and wisdom to understand, to prevent defilements from arising. So he's focused on his actions, his bodily actions. Then, so after the monk has done all of this, all of these initial steps, there's a lot to be done initially. Then, when the monk has this mindfulness and full awareness, that the Tathagata disciplines him further, come, monk, resort to a secluded resting place, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. So he doesn't right away go into seclusion like this, the monk. There are a lot of things to practice beforehand. So if a person doesn't understand this, or if a monk doesn't understand this, then he can fall into a problem where he hasn't established the initial practices yet, but he's in a hurry to go off into seclusion. And if he does that, since his mind isn't ready, it's not prepared, he won't achieve the benefits of that secluded dwelling place. He can actually be harmed in many ways by doing that. So then, after the monk goes to a secluded resting place, maybe he's all alone in the middle of the forest. On returning from his alms round, after his meal he sits down, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect, and establishing mindfulness before him. Abandoning covetousness for the world, he abides with a mind free from covetousness, desire for other people's belongings, desire for things in the world. Abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with a mind free from ill will, compassionate for the welfare of all beings. He purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning drowsiness and lethargy, he abides free from drowsiness and lethargy, percipient of light, mindful and fully aware, he purifies his mind from drowsiness and lethargy. Abandoning restlessness and remorse, he abides unagitated, with the mind inwardly peaceful. He purifies his mind from restlessness and remorse. Abandoning doubt, he abides having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states. He purifies his mind from doubt. So here the monk's now abandoning the 5 hindrances. Having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, Cetasa upakilesa panyayadubali karana, he abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Or you could say he abides contemplating the body in regard to the body. He abides contemplating feelings in regard to feelings, mind in regard to the mind, mental phenomena in regard to mental phenomena, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Now, to remove the 5 hindrances actually, a method is to practice the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So, By establishing one's mind in those wholesome objects, the unwholesome five hindrances can be abandoned, can be removed. Just as Agivesana, the elephant tamer, plants a large post in the earth and binds the forest elephant to it by the neck in order to subdue his forest habits, here it's abbreviated, and to inculcate in him habits congenial to human beings, so these four establishments of mindfulness are the bindings for the mind of the noble disciple in order to subdue his habits based on the household life, to subdue his memories and intentions based on the household life, to subdue his distress, fatigue, and fever based on the household life, and in order that he may attain the true way, he may realize the Four Noble Truths and realize Nibbana. So you can think a monk ordains, right? So he's left household life, left sensual pleasures, but for a long time he has lived in household life. For a long time he has had intentions of sensual pleasure, of gaining and enjoying such and such sensual objects. Maybe he has had intentions of a certain career, of maybe having a family, living in such and such a place, buying a house, having such and such a car. Uh, these various intentions associated with sensual pleasures. So now he's ordained. Maybe he's staying alone in a kuti. But he has all of those memories, all of those intentions from household life. So to abandon those, to remove those, the Buddha's teaching here, the four establishments of mindfulness. So without establishing the mind in these, all those memories can overwhelm the mind. Overwhelm the mind, and those intentions can still exist. So he is ordained as a monk. He has a noble goal to develop the path to attain Nibbana. But all those intentions he brings with him from household life. So they can be an obstacle. So in this way, he establishes his mind in the four establishments of mindfulness. Then that the Tathagata disciplines him further, come monk, abide contemplating the body in regard to the body, but do not think thoughts of sensual desire. And so on with the other establishments of mindfulness, contemplating feelings in regard to feelings, mind in regard to the mind, and mental objects in regard to mental objects, but don't think thoughts of sensual desire. So here the Buddha is saying, don't think such thoughts. Why? Because you can think such thoughts. Such sensual thoughts arise in the mind. So instead of thinking those thoughts, he should try all the time to establish his mind in the four establishments of mindfulness. I don't know if any of you have heard the Janapada Kalyani Sutta. Do any of you know that discourse? The discourse on the most beautiful girl in the land?
Yes, Bhante, it's about the sati, Bhante, about sati.
Yes, it's about mindfulness of the body. So there, I don't have not that much time. I'll explain it in brief because I'd like to leave some time for questions as well. So the scenario the Buddha sets up a simile. So there's the most beautiful girl or woman in the country comes to a certain place. So now in modern times we could think of Miss Canada, Miss America, Miss Sri Lanka, right? So she's crowned as the most beautiful woman in the country. So let's say Miss Canada comes to such an area, comes to such a place, and the people here, people realize, oh, Miss Canada has come. So they start shouting, Miss Canada has come, Miss Canada has come, she's here. So a huge crowd of people gathers around, right? After they hear that, they want to see Miss Canada. Then what happens? Miss Canada, the most beautiful woman in the country, starts dancing and singing. And she's not just dancing and singing like a normal person, she's dancing and singing exquisitely. She's an excellent dancer, excellent singer, and she is the most beautiful woman in the country. So then people start shouting, Miss Canada is dancing and singing, so even more people come around. Even more people gather to see this, to hear Miss Canada dancing and singing. Then a man comes along and he wants to live, he doesn't want to die, he's averse to pain, and they give him a bowl filled to the brim with oil. And they say, you have to carry this bowl filled to the brim with oil between the crowd of people and Miss Canada, who's dancing and singing. And behind you, there will be a man with a raised sword. And if you spill even one drop of oil, right there he's going to cut off your head. So this is the simile that he's explaining. It's really amazing that how we can understand through the simile what mindfulness of the body is, what the establishments of mindfulness are. So this man has to then, so he doesn't have a choice. He's forced into this. So he has to carry this bowl of oil filled to the brim with oil between the most beautiful woman in the country, who is dancing and singing exquisitely on one side, and the crowd of people who are probably hooting and hollering, yelling and screaming on the other side. Now, while he's doing this, will he look either way, either direction? Because he might spill the oil, right? If he spills the oil, he's going to die. So he's not going to look anywhere else besides that bowl of oil in front of him. So in this simile, the Buddha is explaining the bowl of oil filled to the brim is a designation for mindfulness of the body. So what do you think? Practicing mindfulness of the body, should you direct your attention outwards to forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, mental objects? No, because desire can arise, hatred can arise, unwholesome states can arise. When unwholesome states arise, they're conducive to suffering in the future, rebirth in the future. So all the time, every moment, to keep one's mindfulness focused on the body, that's the Buddha's advice. That's the Buddha's teaching. How difficult is that to do? Extremely difficult to do. But that's the Buddha's simile that he explains, a way to practice. So in that way, he's not thinking thoughts of sensual desire. He's not directing his attention outward toward desirable objects. He's focusing on the first establishment of mindfulness. Then he gradually attains the 4 jhanas. Here it's abbreviated in the text. We don't have that much time. So he attains the 4 jhanas, and with that concentrative state of mind, he gains the 3 knowledges, 3 true knowledges. So he recollects his previous lives. Let's say he attains the fourth jhana, the very profound state of concentration, very deep state of concentration. And with that concentrated state of mind, he recollects his previous lives in samsara. 1 life, 2 lives, 3, 4, 5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000 lives, and various eons it's possible for him to recollect. And he understands how he was born in the past, what kind of family he was born into, what he ate. So he remembers the details in the lives too. And he understands how, being born in one place, he passed away from there and was reborn in another place, and how he eventually came to this life. So rebirth in the Buddha's teachings is not just a doctrine, but it's something that at very high levels of practice should be realized in one's own experience. But then again, the Buddha's teaching is sanditthiko, realized in this life, to be experienced for oneself. Ehipassiko, come and see. Now, of course, it's not easy to do this. Not everyone can do this right away, but that possibility is there. And arahants in the past, arahant monks and nuns in the past did this. And then he attains the divine eye, and he sees how beings pass away and are reborn according to their karma, according to their actions of body, speech, and mind. And beings who do good actions by body, speech, and mind are reborn in good destinations. And beings who do unwholesome actions by body, speech, and mind are reborn in bad destinations according to their karma. So this is the natural law of cause and effect. One doesn't take rebirth according to one's own will. One's not born according to the power of a supreme God, but according to one's actions, one's karma. And then he attains the knowledge of the destruction of all defilements, destruction of the taints, the asavas, so the taint of sensual desire, taint of existence, the propensity to accrue karma and be reborn in various states of existence, and the taint of ignorance. So with the destruction of all defilements, he understands birth is destroyed, the spiritual life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more, there's nothing more to be done to attain Nibbana. That monk is able to endure cold and heat. This is a now Arahant monk, is being explained. He's able to endure cold and heat, hunger and thirst, and contact with flies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, and snakes. He is able to endure ill-spoken, unwelcome words, so people might criticize him, disparage him, rebuke him, shout at him, scream at him. He's able to endure all of this patiently, and arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, distressing, and menacing to life. So he's able to patiently endure this pain for various reasons, maybe sicknesses, maybe people assault him with weapons, but he's able to patiently endure all of this. He has no defilements anymore. Being rid of all lust, hate, and delusion, purged of all flaws, he is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutations, and unsurpassed field of merit for the world. So the qualities of the Sangha are present in him as an Arahant. If Agivesana, the king's elephant, dies in old age, untamed and undisciplined, then he is considered an old elephant that has died an untamed death. If the king's elephant dies when middle-aged, untamed and undisciplined, then he is considered a middle-aged elephant that has died an untamed death. If the king's elephant dies when young, untamed and undisciplined, then he is considered a young elephant that has died an untamed death. So too, Agivesana, if an elder monk, a monk who's been high ordained for over 10 years, dies with his taints undestroyed, then he is considered an elder monk who has died an untamed death. If a monk of middle status, maybe between 5 and 10 years seniority, dies with his taints undestroyed, then he is considered a monk of middle status who has died an untamed death. If a newly ordained monk dies with his taints undestroyed, then he is considered a newly ordained monk who has died an untamed death. So based on the status, there's a distinction between the monks, but if he hasn't destroyed all defilements, then he dies untamed. If Agivesana, the king's elephant, dies in old age, well tamed, well disciplined, then he is considered an old elephant that has died a tame death. If the king's elephant dies when middle-aged, well-tamed and well-disciplined, then he is considered a middle-aged elephant that has died a tamed death. If the king's elephant dies when young, well-tamed and well-disciplined, then he is considered a young elephant that has died a tame death. So the main thing here isn't the age, isn't the status of a monk in terms of seniority, but whether whether the monk has been tamed or not. So too, Agivesana, if an elder monk dies with his taints destroyed, then he is considered an elder monk who has died a tame death. If a monk of middle status, middle seniority, dies with his taints destroyed, then he is considered a monk of middle status who has died a tame death. If a newly ordained monk dies with his taints destroyed, then he is considered a newly ordained monk who has died a tame death. That is what the Blessed One said. The novice Achitavata was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So that's how the sutta ends. At the end of the discourse that describes the gradual training of a monk, gradually taming himself according to the Buddha's teaching. One thing that's not mentioned in this sutta, it's mentioned in other discourses, practice of contentment. So a monk lives on what is offered by other people out of faith, right? So the food he eats, the clothing he wears, the robes he wears, the dwellings he lives in, the medicine he uses, they're given by other people out of faith, right? They're given by lay disciples. So since he doesn't use money and earn a living by working at a job to buy whatever he wants, he should be content with whatever he receives. That is one way to remove defilements of the mind, remove desire. So if he's not content with what he receives, one major drawback of that, Buddha explains in a few verses from Dhammapada, Dadati ve yatha saddang yatha pasadananjano tattive mankuyo hoti pare sangpana bhojane nasodivavaratingva samadhing adhigachati. So people give according to their faith and their regard, Dadati ve yatha saddang yatha pasadananjana, according to their confidence, Tattive mankuyo hoti pare sangpana bhojane. So if a monk gets upset about this, about what is received, about the food and drink received from others, nasodivavaratingva, either day or night, he won't attain samadhi. So see how important quality like contentment is. Monk doesn't have that quality, not going to attain samadhi. Buddha's words. Another one that's nice verse from Dhammapada. Salabang nati manyeye nanye sang pihayang chare anye sang pihayang bhikkhu samadhing nadi gacchati. Salabang nati manyeye. So whatever he receives, a monk shouldn't look down on it. Oh, it's inferior quality. Oh, it's a lower thing. Oh, I only received a little bit. Nanye sang pihayang chare. You should not envy what other monks have received. Maybe some very meritorious monks receive excellent things, but one monk receives things that aren't as great of a quality, but he shouldn't envy the other monk. Anye sangpihayang bhikkhu, so a monk who envies the gains of others doesn't attain samadhi, right? So monk should develop quality of contentment with whatever he receives, food, clothing, lodging, and medicine. And he should remove envy, jealousy. about other monks. If he's unable to do this, he's not going to attain samadhi. The causes aren't present in him. So Buddha said in Dhammapada also, Santutti Paramandanam. Contentment is the greatest, supreme wealth. So if a person is content, they don't need something else, right? If a person is content with what they have, they don't need to desire something else, something more. If you're content with the house you have, then you don't need another house. You don't need to desire another house, to go looking for another house, to buy another house. If you're content with your spouse, you don't need to go off and commit adultery, to engage in sexual misconduct, because you're happy with what you have. And you can think in various ways creatively about how to practice contentment. In the commentary, it's explained very nicely. Contentment as threefold. So one is yatha labha santosa, which is to be content with whatever one receives as a monk. So it might be a superior thing, a really nice thing, or it might be a coarse thing. So a monk might receive, I don't know, he might be in the Buddhist times, he was invited by the king for a meal, right? So he would receive the best food in the country from the king. Another time the Buddha goes on alms round, house by house, maybe on the poorest street in the city. So what he receives is very coarse food. But for the Buddha, he is happy with either. He is contented with either. So one should understand how to practice contentment properly to be happy with whatever one receives. Otherwise, if you practice in the wrong way, you can think, oh, this is really nice thing. I don't need this. This is too much for me. And one can get upset, actually. A monk can get upset, oh, I've received this really nice food, but I don't need all this delicious food. It's too much for me. He gets upset, actually. So here's to practice to be content, to be happy with whatever one receives, whether it's superior or inferior. The second way of practicing is yatha balasantosa. So according to his strength, maybe a monk has a particular illness where he has to, maybe he's very susceptible to cold. He's in his 80s maybe when he ordains. So it's difficult for him to live in a dwelling that's maybe open to the air. So he has to live in a dwelling that has walls, that has windows. Otherwise it's painful for him because he's old. His body is susceptible to the cold. So if he receives a dwelling that has walls and windows and a roof, he is happy with that. That is enough for him. One without walls, there's some such like kutis without walls. They're just open all around like a pavilion. That's difficult for him. So he is happy according to his strength, according to his ability. Another one is to yatha sarupa santose, to be content with what is suitable for one. So say, for example, a newly ordained monk comes to a monastery and he's giving a really nice dwelling. Dwelling maybe it even has air conditioning. Maybe it has a separate bathroom. It's a very nice kuti that's been made for the monk. But he thinks, this is really suitable for a senior monk. A monk who maybe has over 10 years seniority. I'm going to give this to a senior monk. I'll go and stay in wherever. So he is suitable. He is happy with what is suitable for him. And he enjoys giving nice things to senior monks. It could be something as simple as a razor. He receives a really nice razor and he gives it to a senior monk and he's happy with the razor. one blade, two blades. That's enough for him. That's another way to practice contentment. So now I've spoken a lot. We've learned the sutta. Does anyone have any questions about what we learned today? I don't know how you normally do the Dhamma discussion, if you unmute your mics or if you type questions in the chat box. I think Linda and Arjuna know more than I do about that.
Now, Budaya Bante.
Nambudai Hari.
Usually we can ask questions directly.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I just have some, I have two questions in here. One is maybe based on your experience. I know that the ordination is, there seems to have a screening. Okay, so I mean to say, so you would ask, what is the reason why this person wants to join the to go into ordination, right? So what I mean, usually, I mean, people might not say the real reason, because I have actually heard and talked to a couple of well, ordained, right? And then very funny, sometimes they said, well, I actually went to monkhood, it's because I'm heartbroken, something like that. Or there was a time, there's a nun, I am not going to name names, but I have met, and then she was very funny to say that she joined nunnery because her ex boyfriend become a monk. So so these are some examples of the reasons. So for my first question is, what is actually, I mean, the real reasons for a person to be accepted? And number two, knowing that a monk has, I heard about 227 precepts. So it's
Let me take your first question first.
all right.
It's easier for me to do it that way.
Okay, that's fine.
So in the Buddha's time or now, people can ordain for various reasons. So we should understand that. Even in the Buddha's time, people ordained just because they saw that the Sangha was supported. Right? There's a case in the Vinaya where there was a young boy who was very delicately nurtured, brought up, and his parents thought, like, how will our son be able to get by when we die? When we pass away, how will he be able to take care of himself? Then they saw that the monks are living in kutis, they have enough food. Why don't we ordain him? So did they ordain him with a noble goal in mind? No. They ordained him because they saw that he could subsist materially in such a lifestyle. So in the Buddhist time that happened, it happens now. So we should understand that, but we shouldn't get upset about that, especially if we get upset about the Sangha. So the Sangha, if you take generally, that includes the Arahant monks, right? So we shouldn't develop an angry, upset state of mind about the Sangha as a whole. And also we shouldn't pick faults on different monks or nuns based on what they're doing. So we can develop equanimity, actually. All beings are owners of their karma. So if they live the monk life or the life of a nun in the wrong way, they can go to hell because of that. That's in the suttas. Lakkhana Sutta, Lakkhana Samyutta, in the Samyutta Nikaya explains that. So people can ordain for right and wrong reasons, but the Buddha explained the correct reason for ordaining in Samyutta Nikaya Satya Samyutta. Correct reason for ordaining, whether in the past, now, or in the future, is to realize the Four Noble Truths, which is to attain Nibbana, escape from the suffering of samsara. So that's the Buddha's final goal. If a person ordains with that idea in mind, That is correct. That is according to the Buddha's wishes. And I mean, screening process in the sense of there's a period of postulancy where a person stays as an upasaka or upasika, as a male or female lay follower, anagadika, in the monastery. So they develop various qualities during that time period. They learn the Dhamma, they associate with the monks or nuns, and then if they're deemed suitable by Lokaswaminansi and the senior monks, then they have the possibility to ordain. Did that answer your question?
Yes, Bante.
Excellent.
And yeah, the second one is just fast. So knowing that if they enter, I mean, if they get ordained and they will be faced with 227 precepts, so it's not easy. So my question is, what is the success rate of monks from your experience or from what you see that continues, and what happens to those that couldn't? Did they back out, and what happened later?
Well, so what's nice in Mahamev now, there's a stepwise period. So normally there's a training as an anagadika, a postulant, for at least a year, where one is living in the monastery, living in a monastic environment, right? So one is left home, left sensual pleasures, and one is learning the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, living with monks or nuns. So there's at least a year of that, where one is following the 5 precepts, including celibacy. So there's that gradual distance from the lay life there. Then after ordination, say as a novice monk, one's following 10 precepts. And one is also practicing what are called Sakya, things to be trained in the Vinaya, in the discipline. And usually for at least 2 years, a novice monk would live in that way. And of course, he's learning Dhamma further. He's learning the discipline further. So when he eventually receives the higher ordination, it's not a huge shock, because gradually he's practicing virtue more and more. He's learning about the precepts. And the environment is conducive to practicing the precepts. Some of them, because of the differences now, for example, the precepts regarding nuns don't apply now, because they apply to fully ordained bhikkhunis who have been ordained by both sanghas, the monks and nuns, and the historical bhikkhuni sangha disappeared. So certain precepts are different in modern times. In modern times, construction is very different. Construction of buildings. So if a precept applying to construction in the Buddha's time is very different now. So the environment, and then the gradual entering into full ordination helps a monk to be able to practice that successfully. If a monk isn't able to do it successfully for various reasons, it's possible that he could disrobe, of course. And then in some cases, it could be possible for him to stay as like a monastery attendant, or he might stay as a novice if it's difficult to keep all of the full ordination precepts. So those avenues are open, or else he might go back to lay life and continue in that way.
So very flexible, I can see.
Mhm.
Thank you, Bante.
Mhm. Okay, so Doug asked a very important question. There's a sutta related to this, but I don't have it with me right now. In the Sutta Nipata, I think if you can read that, I think that would help you as well. Let me type that for all of you. You can all try to read this sutta called Chunda Sutta in Sutta Nipata. And it's about monks who aren't behaving properly and how, as a layperson, you should think about those monks. So, yeah, it's of course difficult to know a person's real intentions in ordaining, and a monk can ordain and preach the wrong things. So what can we do as lay people to be vigilant of fake versus real teaching? The best thing you can do is learn the teaching yourselves. So if you yourself know the Dhamma, have read the suttas extensively, it's very easy for you to determine if a person is teaching what accords to the Buddha's teachings or not. Very easy to tell. If you gain knowledge of the Dhamma yourself, then that protects your life, actually. When I was a layman, actually, I went to a meditation retreat where maybe some of you know what's happening in Sri Lanka, where people are giving fruits of the path. They go to a meditation retreat and say, oh, now you are Sotapanna, now you are Sakadagami. Like that. Big problem, huge problem in the dispensation now. So I went to such a place in lay life. But because I had read some suttas, hadn't read the whole Sutta Pitaka or anything, but I'd read, I think, most of the Majjhima Nikaya at that point, and I understood this monk is not teaching exactly what's in the suttas, exactly according to the Buddha's teaching. So no matter what he told me, because I knew the Buddha's teachings, I was protected in that way. So I didn't get caught up in all of that. So that was only because I had read the teachings myself. If I didn't know them, then of course I would have believed him, right? So the best thing you can do is learn the teachings yourself. Now we have translations. So many books have been published. They're not that expensive. I think at least if you have a very hectic schedule and very little free time, at least if you can read the whole Majjhima Nikaya, that's a huge thing. If you have more time, then of course try to read all the main books of the Sutta Pitaka, Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Digha Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, and then the main books of the Khuddaka Nikaya, like the Udana Itivuttaka, Theragata, Therigata, Dhammapada, and Sutta Nipata. If you have time, you can read all of those. That's a huge protection for you. Then you can know right away whether a monk, a lay person, is teaching what is correct or not. I hope that answered your question. Any other questions?
Bante, can I ask one question, please?
Yes.
Bante, I would like to ask Bante about the three knowledges, the Tevijja. Those three knowledges will be attained after the fourth jhana, Bante. I guess my question is, we don't need to really do the arupa jhana to attain those three knowledges, Bante. Am I correct to say that, Bante?
Yes, I think you're correct to say that. As I remember, the Buddha distinguishes two types of arahants, the Panya Vimutti arahants, and the Ubato Bhaga Vimutti arahants. So the Panya Vimutti arahants have developed the four jhanas, and they've attained liberation through insight. So they don't have the Arupa jhanas, but they are liberated arahants, right? And then there are also another group of arahants who have attained the 4 jhanas, have attained the 4 formless attainments, and have attained liberation. So their purification of mind is the same, but they just have different abilities in samatha meditation. As I understand, I think, yes, you're correct. I think you only need the 4 jhanas to attain the 3 knowledges.
Right. Thank you, Bhante.
Only need the 4 jhanas. Anyone else who's not on the video, you can ask a question through the chat. We have 12 participants.
Bhante, can I ask another question? It's about the, now I compare this sutta, Bhante, with another sutta. I think it was, I forgot the sutta's name. Oh, Seka Sutta, Bhante.
Okay.
The Seka Sutta mentioned about the charana, and I believe in this sutta also it's mentioned about the charana. But in the Seka Sutta, I think Supreme Buddha preached. On top of this, there are 7 more things, right, Bhante? It's the, I think it's the Satta, Hiri, Ottappa, and Sutta, and then those, I think it's, right, the effort, and then Samatha and Vipassana, I think. But all those, I think everything was 15 factors in that Sutta, Bhante. So, so whatever is preached in this sutta, it's like kind of like similar to that Seka Sutta, Bhante. Is everything is about the charana too, Bhante.
Different suttas you find different ways the Buddha explains the training. So this is one of the, like this would come under the category I said in the beginning, Anupubhasikha, the gradual training where the Buddha shows step by step what things that a monk practices. The textbook example of this type of sutta is the Samanyapala Sutta in the Digha Nikaya that gives the most extensive account. It's a very long sutta, gives the most extensive account of a monk's training. So in that sutta, it also has a very beautiful story, drama that's happening in the sutta because King Ajatasattu had killed his father, King Bimbisara, so he committed patricide, and the Anantarika Papa Karma, one of the 5 heinous deeds. So he's destined for hell after death, and he is troubled in mind. He's agitated in mind because of what he's done. So he wants to go and visit some ascetic or Brahmin who can calm him down. And he eventually comes and meets the Buddha, and the Buddha gives him this long discourse on the benefits of the monastic life, on what one gains through the monastic life. But at the end of the sutta, is touching really. After King Ajatasattu leaves, the Buddha says, like, because he killed his father, like, no, rather you could say, if he hadn't killed his father, then right here, as he was sitting, and he would have attained stream entry. But that bad karma prevented that from happening because he was destined for hell. So even the Buddha can't change that. Buddha can't change that karma. But that's the, if you want to read that, that gives the most extensive account. And then in other suttas you find maybe the Buddha focused on one particular aspect of the training. So there are various suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya that focus on insight. So how to contemplate on impermanence, how to contemplate on suffering, non-self, or you find suttas on how to develop the spiritual faculties, right? How to practice recollection of the Buddha, how to practice the Brahma Viharas, right? So there, if you look at each of the four main books of the Sutta Pitaka, you can find in the Samyutta Nikaya, for example, there's a very clear, gradual doctrinal exposition. In the first book of the Samyutta Nikaya, you have very nice verses, beautiful verses about merit and demerit, about developing good qualities. And then the second book is about dependent origination, explaining the law of cause and effect, how samsara, how the cycle of samsara regenerates itself from within. And then the third book explains the five aggregates affected by clinging, which is the ultimate referent of the first noble truth of suffering. So to understand that they are impermanent, one has to understand dependent origination first. Cause and effect. That's how impermanent things arise. So there's a gradual progression. Then in the fourth book, you find the teachings on the six sense bases. So that's also profound, how through the experience in the six sense bases, the five aggregates affected by clinging arise. And then in the fifth book of the Samyutta Nikaya, you have the 37 requisites of enlightenment, in Singhala Satis Bodhipakshika Dharma, how they're explained in detail in various Samyuttas. So how to practically develop the path is explained. So the monks in the past who organized the Samyutta Nikaya in that way, is really amazing the way they did it. They could have put the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta first, the Buddha's first discourse, or the Anatta Lakkana Sutta. They could have put that second, but they didn't. The Anatta Lakkana Sutta is in like the middle of the Samyutta Nikaya. Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is almost at the end, in the last book. So if you haven't already read it, the Majjhima Nikaya, if you read the whole Majjhima Nikaya, you can get a much clearer overview of what you should practice, how to practice it, to clear up your maybe misunderstandings of the Dhamma, to gain more knowledge about the Dhamma, if you can read the whole Majjhima Nikaya.
Thank you, Ante. Wow.
So we've gone past 8 o'clock. I'll wait a little more to see if there are any more questions before we can end for today.
Sir,
Yes?
a question about what's so significant about 84,000. I don't know the exact term in English. It's called 84,000 Dharma Skandha.
In Sinhala, yeah.
In Sinhala, you call it Dharma Skandha. So what is this 84,000 significant about?
That is a good question. I myself don't know the answer to that. Do you have this?
Answer, just to add one more little bit, it's also, I have heard that all these, the entire Pali canon is to teach the Dhamma, to realize the Four Noble Truths. And it's also I have heard this 84,000 is describing in 84,000 methods, the path is being described. Is that what it is? Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, if you take the Dhamma as a whole, so I think in Untitled Arahant Sariputta gives a simile. So Arahant Sariputta was the chief disciple in wisdom, right? So he explained that just as all of the footprints of the animals that walk on land, they can fit into the footprint of an elephant because the footprint of an elephant is the biggest, right? It's the largest of all the land-dwelling animals. So in the same way, as I remember in the sutta, all wholesome states can be included in the Four Noble Truths. So the Buddha's teaching, so what I explained, for example, in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the third book of the Samyutta Nikaya, it's the Kanda Samyutta, and the five aggregates affected by clinging. So you can consider that whole book as to be about the First Noble Truth, right? Because the First Noble Truth, Sankitena Panchupadana Kanda Dukkha, in short, the five aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. So to explain that, there's a whole book in the Samyutta Nikaya dedicated to that. That you can consider as the First Noble Truth. The last book that explains the different ways to develop factors of the path, that we can understand as the ways to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. So if we think creatively, we should try to be able to see the Four Noble Truths explained through the Buddha's discourses. So in this sutta, the Buddha never uses, I don't think, the words Noble Truths, right?
Yes.
I don't remember. But the whole sutta is describing the path to the cessation of suffering, right? And I remember, I think in the Kacchanagotta Sutta, the Buddha explains, Kacchanagotta Sutta, or maybe Anuradha Sutta, I think Anuradha Sutta, formerly and also now, what I teach is suffering and the cessation of suffering. So that's what the Buddha explains as his teaching. Or in another place in the Itivuttaka, the Buddha explains that he has two Dhamma teachings. Papang papakato passate, which is see evil, see unwholesome things as unwholesome, and then papang papakato disva tatte. I don't remember the exact Pali word. I think it's to become disenchanted with it. Tatte nibbindata maybe. So to see evil, to see unwholesome things as unwholesome, and to become disenchanted with them. So what's explained there, right, is so unwholesome things are the origin of suffering. So to become disenchanted with them leads to the cessation of suffering. And to understand one of the noble truths, one of the Four Noble Truths, one understands the other three. So I think we can understand all of Buddha's teachings as encompassed in the Four Noble Truths. So if there are no other questions, I think we can end for today.
Bante, I have one question.
Yes, Prasad.
Bante, now, one of the suttas, Buddha says that rise, stream enterer comes to know the arise and cessation, samudaya and atangama of spiritual faculties, saddha, viriya, sati, samadhi, prajna. Can you explain that I can understand the arise of Saddha, Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, Prajna, but how does he sees the cessation of Saddha, Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, Prajna? The reason for asking is Buddha says that these faculties comes to the highest level when he becomes arahant. So, but then it comes to the higher levels. But in those places, in those suttas, Buddha doesn't explain about the cessation or attangama of these faculties. Can you explain with kindness what did he mean by attangama of these faculties?
I recently read that sutta where it's referring to the arising and cessation of the 5 spiritual faculties. I myself don't know the answer to that question. I should look in the commentary to see what the commentary says about that. I mean, we can think, I don't know the exact answer, but we can think, so say, before a person hears the Dhamma, they don't have faith in the Buddha. But when they hear the Dhamma, faith can arise, right? So you can see faith as a conditioned thing. If faith isn't a conditioned thing, then it should be permanent. So then it wouldn't have a cause or condition. But since it does have a cause for hearing the Dhamma, to gain faith in the Buddha, you can understand that it's a conditioned thing. And maybe through Ayoniso Manasikara, this is just conjecture, maybe through Ayoniso Manasikara, one's faith can decrease in the Buddha. If one thinks maybe unwisely about another religious teaching, or thinks unwisely about things that are a basis for doubt, doubt can increase, and one's faith might decrease. So for a stream enter, their faith is established, right? In the faith in the 5 spiritual faculties is established, so it's not going to decrease. I can't give a complete answer, I'm afraid. I should also look in the commentary about that. Maybe when Sangha Bodhisattva does the next program, you can ask him that question.
Thank you, Swaminathan. The comment to what you said, when Buddha explains, when Buddha brings the word attangama or cessation, he denotes the cessation of suffering with it. So that means it's, I think, anupadidamang. So like that, it goes like it's in future it will not arise in that state. So so I think anupadidam. So attangam, the meaning it goes like that. So if as you said, like when he has ayoniso manasikara, losing of these 5 faculties means that it is like anicca, like niruddha, not attangama. So so there's the difference between this niruddha and attangama. So that's the, because of that, I think there has to be some other meaning for this. So this is what I understand, because he always explained the attangama with the attangama of suffering to denote that state. So rather than going back to the suffering level. So niruddha or anicca is going back to the suffering level. So, but attangama is there's the other way. So going higher. So that's what makes this a little bit difficult to understand for me. So if you can find the answer, if you can discuss with other scholars, and please you can let us know, understand this. I have another question. So I mean, also, now Buddha said, like, Sasana, the Saddhamma and Brahmacharya will last only 500 years. So how can we grab this thing, Swaminathan, with kindness can you explain?
Have you read Lokaswaminathi's Acharya-Manusu in Sinhala or the English translation?
Swaminathan? Yeah, Swaminathan? I didn't understand
Have
what
you
you said,
read
Swaminathan.
Lokaswaminathi's either the Sinhala book Acharya-Manusu or the English translation Buddha the
I have
Marvelous?
the book, Swaminathan. I read a little bit, but not fully. I read part of it.
It's explained in that book. So the 500 years where the Dhamma will last is said to be the Prativeda Sasana, or so it's like the period of attainment, where, so that was, if you look historically, that was the age of the Arahants, right, in India and Sri Lanka. And then after that, we don't find the age of the Arahants ended, right? So it's still possible to attain fruits of the path now, but it's not like in the Buddha's time where it happened very frequently and easily for people. So that's how Lokaswaminatha explains it in that book.
Swaminathan, now who became Sotapanna at Buddha's time, and even within those 500 years, now they go to heaven or they are reborn again and again. So these days also, there's a there should be those people who are born for, like, they have 7 births. Some are 7 births, some have 3 to 7 births, some have 1 to 3, some have 1 birth. So these people are supposed to be born now, so they should be around us. So, and if there are Sotapanna, there should be Sakudagami, Anagami, Arahant too. So this is just the possibilities. So can you tell more what do you think about this?
Well, presumably those who attain fruits of the path would be reborn in the heavenly world. Those in the Buddha's time who attain fruits of the path would be reborn in the heavenly world. We can think of Visakha, Anathapindika. So if you read the suttas, I don't think I've ever come across a case in the suttas where a person attained the fruits of the path and was during the Buddha's time reborn in the human world. I don't ever remember reading such a case.
In Sakapanya Sutta, Sakka says that, I'll be, once I disappear from here, then I'll be again become Sakka, and then reborn as a human, then come back to heavenly world, and then from there till Akanittagami he goes in Brahma world. Then from Akanittagami he becomes Arahant. So,
but presumably his lifespan is maybe millions of years, right? So it could be millions of years until he comes to the human world.
So Swami, so once a Sotapanna person, he becomes he's born in heaven or in human world again. So he has to become Sotapanna again, right, Swamina?
No. That's a permanent. He's established in that. He or she is established in that. So really, what's amazing is that their virtue will be pure in all the lives following, because that's one of the factors of a stream enter, right? One of the Sotapattiyanga. So even if they're born in a place where there's no Dhamma, say, in an age when there's no Buddha in the human world, they will intrinsically be virtuous. I think there's a story in the commentary about that. Maybe in the Dhammapada commentary.
Teruvan Sarana Swamina, bohong ping.